3, 2, 1.
New York, NY. LaunchPod starts now.
Welcome to the New York LaunchPod, a podcast highlighting new startups, businesses, and openings in the New York City area. I'm Hal Cooper-Smith, and stepping onto LaunchPod, we have Mike Rothman, the co-founder of Fatherly. And Fatherly is a website, not surprisingly, geared to fathers. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Thanks, Hal. Really happy to be here.
So what is Fatherly exactly?
Well, as a correction to your definition, I would say it is a digital destination for young parents, not just dads. Obviously, the name would suggest that it's just for dads. But what we found is that over the last kind of 14 years, call it, there really hasn't been any innovation in the parenting media space. You have magazines, you have websites which are geared almost exclusively towards moms, or kind of this idealized version of mom as parent. And what's happened, certainly for this kind of next generation of parents, young Gen X'ers, Millenials, what have you, is that parenting or ideas, attitudes, and behaviors around parenting has shifted. It's now more of a 50-50 responsibility. So my background is one of the first employees at Thrillist, an online lifestyle guide for young single guys. And I'd been there for 7 years. And kind of a funny thing happens after marketing to young single guys for 7 years. Namely, that audience is no longer single or as young, and neither is the founding team that was marketing to that audience. And we noticed that there is a real kind of gaping hole in the marketplace for what happens to that consumer once he becomes a parent. And Fatherly, it exists to kind of fill that hole, to provide serviceable recommendations that are also specific to the age of your kid.
So what were people doing before your parenting destination?
Well, there are plenty of parenting sites out there. There's plenty of blogs. You have Baby Center, which reaches probably 78% of all moms across the country. But these are, again, sites that were started maybe 15 years ago that rely on a lot of evergreen content, the user experience, the design. The content isn't necessarily optimized for a consumer today who gets most of their content on mobile, gets most of their content on social. And so we wanted to design a parenting site from the ground up that applies best practices for marketing to young men or even to young women, kind of the best in, I would call, kind of lifestyle publishing, and blending that with the more kind of straightforward, just the facts, service-oriented journalism that's required in the parenting space when you have millions of people in arguably the most inquisitive and acquisitive phase of their life.
So you mentioned that it's not just a site for fathers, but parents. What's the gender breakdown?
Well, right now it is mostly men. It's probably 75% male, female. And the thinking is that if you're developing a site for moms, you're not necessarily going to be able to attract men. But if you create a site that's geared towards men as parents, and the content that we have on the site, again, you could take a look at it. It's not particularly gendered. But by getting men, you would also get women. And women are still the primary source of content discovery for guys. And so we... in kind of reaching men, we necessarily have to also market to their significant others as well.
I have taken a look at the site. It's wonderful.
Thanks.
Once you launched the site, how did you try to attract that audience? How did you get noticed on the vast web of the internet?
Well, we had a beta that we had developed for about 9 months. It was a weekly email newsletter that initially started as a group of maybe 300 people. It was the product of an early partnership with the 92nd Street Y, the oldest parenting organization in the country, based here in New York. They operate a whole bunch of new parenting workshops. We approached them, my partner Simon Isaacs and I, with this idea that, hey, we wanted to fill this hole in the market for kind of a more contemporary parenting site geared a bit more particularly to dads. And they told us, hey, we've actually seen a surge in enrollment of men taking these new parenting workshops that we host. And it's been an internal priority for us to market to men and continue this education beyond the 8 to 12 week workshops that we host. So we'd actually be delighted to give you access to the database that we have. And so initially we just created a very basic registration page capturing email address, the age of the child. We were fortunate to get an email to that 92Y database, and we ended up getting a yield of, like I said, maybe 200-300 subscribers, of guys who had taken these workshops. So we were testing the concept of Fatherly as a curated weekly newsletter. That 300 people over the course of a couple of weeks turned into a couple thousand people. And when we launched, we probably had about 10,000 people who were getting the email regularly, including some folks in media, not just in New York, but in LA and San Francisco, who would often repost some of the pieces that we would publish. And it started with kind of pure curation. So we weren't writing anything other than headlines and maybe some description text under the assumption that there's plenty of parenting content out there. It's just very disaggregated, and it wasn't really tailored, packaged in a way that kind of most men would feel comfortable consuming a lot of this information. And we realized fairly quickly that, hey, we actually should be writing this ourselves. There are ideas and concepts out there that aren't being written. And so Fatherly was born from that. So we launched with this beta list. We were very fortunate to get a lot of terrific press. Fortune magazine, Business Insider, the New York Times has written us up 3 times in our first 4 months of existence. We were on the Today Show as parenting experts around Father's Day, offering kind of 4 minutes of fun gifts that women could get their husbands can get their dads. So that press has been really effective for us. We also have produced what I would consider kind of thought leadery pieces. So we were the first to introduce this list of the 50 best places to work for new dads. Original content, thoroughly researched. We partnered with Wharton, and specifically they have a program like the Work-Life Balance Institute. A guy, Professor Stu Friedman, who runs it, helped us with the study. That ended up getting national news, USA Today, Fast Company. So a lot of really great earned media on the back of a lot of terrific original reporting. And I think, again, just the fact that we're filling a hole in the market that hasn't been addressed. And I think a lot of the press that we've received has been, about time. And that's been like a really terrific, it's been terrific validation for us that we've kind of timed this right. We're not, 5 years ahead of where the culture, where the culture is at the moment.
So you started with an email list of 300 people. Mm-hmm. Did it grow simply by referrals?
Yeah, we were pretty diligent about putting together benchmarks about what success actually looked like. And one of the metrics was open rates. Are people actually opening this? We also wanted to do this for a period of, call it 10 weeks, to make sure that this initial beta group didn't feel like they're under the microscope and otherwise obligated to open or kind of take positive actions. So we gave ourselves 10 weeks to give this audience enough time to naturally lose interest. And we had benchmarks around open rates, click-through rates, organic growth. And very quickly, we exceeded those goals. And
what were your benchmarks?
Open rates, we were looking for 40% or better. Organic growth, we were looking for probably about the same, 40% or better each week. And again, we're dealing with small numbers initially, so we were able to wildly exceed that. But still, that was enough validation for us that we weren't engaging in wishful thinking, that we had real data to support the fact that, hey, guys really want this, and even their spouses want this. And we've continued to take a very metrics-driven approach, month over month, week over week, to make sure that, again, we're not fooling ourselves and that there's a real audience for what we're creating.
How large is your audience now?
So last month, 3 months in, we eclipsed 1 million uniques. We also have partnerships with some of the largest sites out there, so Huffington Post, Business Insider, Time.com, and that gives us access to probably another 3 million uniques per month through these regular referral partners who regularly, meeting multiple times per week, will pick up our content and syndicate it to their audiences. We also have about 125,000 daily email subscribers, which is frankly where we thought we would be probably 14, 15 months in, not 3 months in.
How did you develop those partnerships with the large sites?
These are relationships that either I've had or that were 1 degree removed. We recognize that a lot of the content we were creating was original. As an example, a big part of our MO is finding ridiculously overqualified people to give incredibly practical parenting advice. So we found the Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, to give tips on how to hack the pre-K admissions process in your neighborhood, or a Navy SEAL on how to dominate hide-and-go-seek with your kids, or Malala and her father about how to raise a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Content that is, frankly, of general interest, whether you have kids or not. And we noticed that this type of content didn't necessarily exist anywhere else on the web, these other partners recognize that as well, thought there would be interest among their readers, and have found that we're kind of a regular source of this type of content. And that's allowed us to facilitate these wonderful relationships.
Is it expensive to develop that type of content?
That's a good question. I think we have a really talented editorial director who's been with us from nearly the beginning, who has 20 years of experience. Who's also has very direct empirical experience as a new father, which clearly for what we're doing is important. And it really depends on the type of content that you're creating. There are a lot of sites that will rely on interns creating a lot of listicles, and that might work if you're just really focusing on traffic, but we're really focused on building a meaningful brand that has real credibility, that establishes real trust with an audience. There's no more high stakes, high stakes topic than someone's child. And we don't take that lightly. And we want to make sure that we may not individually be the very best people to be giving parenting advice, but I think the thought is we'll find the best people and we'll sit them down and ask them the questions that you would want to ask if you were sitting next to them at a dinner party.
How'd you get Arnie Duncan, for example?
My partner, Simon Isaacs, worked with the White House previously. He had done development work with the Clinton Foundation, and so through kind of that universe, we were able to get access to Arnie and his team. We also just did an interview with Megan Smith, who's the Chief Technology Officer of the United States, and had a fantastic interview with her where she gave advice about how to get kids into math and science. It looks like we also have some other folks of that caliber coming up as well. But we also, I should mention, have a platform called the Fatherly Forum that invites perspectives from ordinary readers, everyone from actually a mentee of mine, a guy who was in prison for 7 years, who raised his child behind bars for the first 7 years of his child's life, who wrote a really phenomenal first-person perspective on what that's like. We also had Sally Krawcheck, who's the CEO, one of the first female CEOs of a major financial services institution, I think it was Merrill Lynch, give a first-person perspective on why you want to work like your kids are watching. And this range is important to us because it's not just Arnie Duncan's opinion that matters. It's a guy who's been through, really trying personal experience who also might be able to offer some really thoughtful nuggets. And I think what we've realized is that when it comes to parenting, everyone is an expert at their own experience. And we want to invite as many of those experiences onto the platform.
And so when you're looking at those various experiences or various different type of content, what do you think is important in terms of parenting advice? What theme do you look for?
Making sure that it's evidence-based. While there are a lot of opinions, a lot of those opinions are right for different people. A lot of, someone could be a free-range parent or a helicopter parent or a libertarian parent. There's no right or wrong answer. So what we strive to do is provide experts who can simply offer perspectives based on data, irrefutable data, and it's really up to the audience to make what they will of it.
How often is new content generated?
Every day.
How much content do you generate in each day?
That will change. We're ramping up right now, so we produce probably 6 new articles per day at the moment.
What's your target audience?
Target audience, someone who, call it like adults 25 to 55 who are on their first or second kid. For the first year, just because there's such a large number of parents, there's so many different topics that are relevant to parents with kids of different ages that we wanted to get out of the gate and really just focus on pregnancy to age 2, to the extent that we would focus on topics that are very age specific. So as an example, if it's week 28 during pregnancy and the milestone is that your kid can hear sound for the first time, rather than giving you 8 paragraphs about what's going on gestationally, which you could find in a million other destinations, we talked to CJ Ramon from the Ramones to riff on the topic. What should be the first music that your kid hears in the world? And taking these developmental milestones and couching it in language and in stories that are frankly a bit more conversational, a bit better wired for the social web. And then mapping that with content that's of general interest with the Arnie Duncan piece or the Navy SEAL piece, etc.
Do you have any geographic skews?
Right now, the audience seems to be coming from your top 15 DMAs, broken down in kind of order of size. So New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, etc.
DMAs meaning cities?
Cities, metro areas.
How many people do you have working for you?
So we have 6 full-time people. We have several part-time folks. We have a couple different vendors that we work with fairly regularly. We're looking to fill 4 slots right now, looking to add to the editorial team, looking for a full-time associate editor, 5 years-ish of experience. We're looking for a social media strategist. We're looking for a head of sales. We're looking for an audience development director, for a lead front-end engineer. So I guess that's 5 positions.
So you're hiring a lot of people.
Hiring a lot of people. We've seen that what we're doing is working, and we want to start doubling down.
How are you getting the resources for that?
We raised the seed round in April, and in addition to that, we're now starting to monetize, albeit slowly, but between what we raised in the seed and the revenue that we're generating from our first brand partnerships, that'll allow us to staff the team.
What are the brand partnerships like?
We just wrapped a campaign with Spotify. So Spotify recognized that parents are actually an incredibly attractive marketing segment for them because parents tend to use Spotify white noise channels to soothe their kids and put them to sleep. Or they just use Spotify to get their kids to dance, get their kids to calm down during bath time. And that represents a tremendous upsell opportunity for Spotify because parents don't want to interrupt those experiences with ads. So they want to communicate that they're a terrific tool for parents. And so what we did is we talked to 5 major musicians, everyone from Ben Harper to this big EDM DJ, Laid Back Luke. He's got 2 million plus followers, who are also dads, to talk about how music influences their day-to-day as parents. And we got them to also offer up really amazing, fantastically curated playlists of what they play their own kids.
And how large was your seed round?
So it's public. You look at me somewhat conspiratorially. It was $2 million.
And what did you do with that money?
We threw it up in the air and we danced underneath it. And then we
sounds very fatherly.
Right. And then it's effectively what a lot of guys do with their disposable income when they have kids. We used it to bring our editorial director on full time to start staffing up in terms of the business side of the business, the editorial side of the business, to bring on a technology partner.
So aside from marketing to single men for 7 years, what else helped you prompt this idea?
So I've been a Big Brother for 15 years. The Big Brothers Big Sisters program started when I was a freshman at Brown University in Providence, and had a fantastic experience with Big Brothers. And there were also some somewhat tumultuous moments. I had a little who was incarcerated, who was already kind of involved with the law through their juvenile justice program. And as a result of that, I ended up creating a scholarship for my little brother's biological little brother, with whom I had spent a lot of time, who, as a result of a couple different factors, the incarceration of his brother, the re-incarceration of his mother, dad was already incarcerated, he was being threatened with foster care. And so with another friend from school, we decided to create a scholarship to benefit my little, to put him into a boarding school, a parochial school, something other than the New York foster care system. Very long story short, we ended up biking from New York to Los Angeles, had people pledge a penny per mile, had Big Brothers match what we raised, and ended up creating a scholarship to benefit not just my little, but rising 8th graders each year in the Big Brothers program. As a result of all of that work, I became interested in sort of what all of the adult males, the mentors, the fathers for a lot of these kids were doing, that these kids had to be in this program in the first place. Like, where the hell are these guys? Turns out a lot of them are in jail, suffering from substance abuse, suffering from poverty. And I found this organization called Career Gear, which is like a dress for success for guys coming out of prison, poverty, substance abuse, that looks to offer a suit, hence the gear part, as kind of a symbol of these guys, like their re-entry into kind of normal civilian life, and offers mentoring services to get them back involved in their families, their communities. And I had a really terrific experience with a whole bunch of adult mentees in the program to the extent that I ended up becoming involved at a board level and now co-chair the board at Career Gear. So between the professional experience of marketing to young, affluent single men and the non-professional experience of working with folks who aren't as lucky, I realized that, you know what, kind of all these signs point in one direction, and that's helping men succeed. And as I look down the barrel of the next 10 years of my life, I realized that this idea of parenthood is something that's probably going to be a little bit less than abstract sooner rather than later. And what's more important than raising healthy, smart, well-adjusted kids, hence Fatherly.
And how did you see an opportunity in the market?
Initially it seemed almost too obvious. It seemed like all of my friends are having kids, spending a ton of time and attention and disposable income on these kids and on decisions involved, like kind of life stage-based decisions, whether it's getting a car, getting a 529 insurance program, buying a house for the first time, outfitting a home, a nursery, and where are they getting this information? Like what's guiding them? And it seemed to be a lot of questions over beers with friends. Their spouses, their wives were absorbing a ton of information online, or these guys were frantically Googling from a mobile device. And I thought there probably had to be some kind of better solution than that. But I was also a bit concerned. I think we looked at this space, and it seemed so obvious that it was either a white space or it was a graveyard. And it turns out there were a lot of corpses, a lot of big media companies that tried to reach this next generation of parents, but they were generally looking to do that as a print magazine, which falls short for a lot of reasons because you can't just speak to everybody in one voice. A guy with a 5-year-old has very, very different needs than someone who's in the second trimester or who has a 2-month-old. And you necessarily have to use technology to segment users based on where they are in the parenting life cycle. So after sussing that out, talking to marketing partners, putting together this initial test with the 92nd Street Y, we realized, hey, there's a real there, and decided to pursue this full bore.
I love the name. I'm really impressed that you got it on the internet when there are so many sites already available.
It's hard to have a solid one-word domain these days, and we're lucky actually to know the owner of that domain, and we still have a very good relationship with him.
So once you had this test email newsletter that grew, how long until you developed your full-fledged site?
Well, after a couple months, we ended up putting together a very quick and dirty WordPress site, almost as a repository for all this content that we were developing ourselves. And actually, even before that, we built a Tumblr to house this information. I'm not technical. My co-founder, Simon, isn't technical, so we had to rely on just out-of-the-box tools. And fortunately, part of the reason why there's so many startups today is because everything, like technology in many ways, has become commodified. It's never been easier to create content. It's obviously harder with so much content to get to the right people. But we ended up using a Tumblr, graduating to a WordPress, and now we're using what we'd consider a best-in-class solution in RebelMouse, which is a CMS built by Paul Berry, who is the CTO of the Huffington Post, who built such a phenomenal CMS with Huffington Post that he decided to effectively turn that into a SaaS product that he can offer to brands, to publishers, so they can focus on what they do best, which is creating content that connects with a valuable audience.
Is it weird not being a father and giving fatherly advice or having a website based on fathers?
No, and we certainly get this question. I get this question a lot. I have a co-founder, Simon, who's a new dad. He's the one who talks on the Today Show because he knows of fatherhood. Micah, our editorial director, also is a father. He's the one looking at every piece of content that goes out. My experience is understanding this consumer, again, that I've been kind of talking to the same guy the entire time. Perhaps not being a father allows me to be a bit more neutral or disinterested, and perhaps that could be helpful. There is someone, though, who reminded me, she used to be the president of a major network. When this question came up, she told me I should say, well, you know what, Nickelodeon isn't run by fucking children. So that's my response.
What type of fathers or what type of parents do you think our generation will be? Because you think about our parents' generation, and no one could have expected that they would be different parents than the previous generation. Based on the advice that you're giving, what type of parents do you think our generation will be?
Who the hell knows is the right answer. I think one way to look at it is we look at Matt Weiner's representation of parents in the Mad Men era, and some of the behaviors that they exhibited in front of their kids or some of their parenting methods seem so outlandish that it's funny these days. Smoking in front of kids, drinking in front of kids, getting kids to smoke when they're 10, 12 years old. Who knows how this generation and all of our knowledge and all of our studies and best practices and all of our diligence will be perceived in 20 years by some future generation with that much more information parodying us in our silly ways.
So on your website, in the description, you say it's for men who understand that embracing what they've become doesn't mean giving up who they are. What does that mean?
It means that just because you have a child doesn't mean that you're a completely different person the next day. You're still the same guy. You still have the same general interests, the same sense of humor, albeit with a lot less time and a lot less sleep.
So what does that mean for your website?
Well, it means we have to be a bit more to the point. It means, whereas, let's say, Thrillist was a bit more irreverent, a guy who has kids maybe has a little bit less time for irreverence, so you have to be a bit more wry. Maybe it's more like a wink and a nod than humor that kind of takes its time. These are guys who come to us because they know they're going to get practical, sound parenting advice. They're still, they're still the same guy that they were deep down at age like 15, 16, just again with a lot more responsibility on their shoulders.
How do you keep people coming back to your site?
Well, building an email list from the outset, I think, is one way to do that. Because this is an audience that has less time, what we want to do is get them to raise their hand and say, hey, I trust you, I want content from you, make it easy for me. So being able to sign up for a newsletter allows us not have to remarket to the same consumer again and again the way that we would if we were just relying on Facebook or just relying on finding web traffic through other means. Would
you ever focus on grandfathers? Grandparents?
We do get the occasional write-in from grandparents, so maybe we should go out and buy grandparently.com if it's still available.
Grandfatherly?
Grandmotherly.
What are your expansion plans?
From a product perspective, we plan on developing more content, products, tools that are focused more on guys or parents broadly with kids that are older than age 5. Right now, as I mentioned, most of the kind of core age-specific editorial focus has been expecting through 2 to 5 by the end of this year. We'll also be developing a commerce product. Right now, we have affiliate commerce throughout the site. We plan on using the data that we get from our affiliate commerce partners to figure out what types of products are most popular, what price point, what manufacturers resonate best to inform our ultimate go-to-market commerce strategy.
Would you ever consider doing a Fatherly podcast aside from this one?
If it's anything like this, we'll probably do multiple podcasts.
Mike, you spoke about some great things. I love the Fatherly website. I can't wait to be a father. I can't wait to be able to use the Fatherly website regularly. And sometimes I sneak onto it even though I'm not a father. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Well, make sure your girlfriend doesn't see your web history. You might want to manage the impressions that you're giving her. But anyway, I appreciate being on here. This is terrific. Love the previous podcasts.
If you want to learn more about the New York Launchpod, you can follow us on social media at NYLaunchpod or visit nylaunchpod.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the New York Launchpod. For more information, please visit nylaunchpod.com.